What is going on, everybody? What is up? Welcome in to another Friday afternoon AMA. We're getting closer to the season. More football is being played. It is exciting, super exciting time of year. So welcome in, everybody, to the AMA. We already got questions going. Man, like an hour and a half ago. Cameron, you're in here early, man. All right. So AMA, just toss in a question. We'll just go as long as we do, and we'll just see what happens. But yeah, Cameron was in here bright and early. One quarterback, 12 by 9, half PPR. Trade away DJ Moore, Leggett, Kamara for Pittman, Wandale, Moss, and a 25 first. Good question. One quarterback, so that devalues the 25 first, 12 by 9, half PPR. I think I'd take the DJ Moore side on this one. It's pretty close. DJ Moore and Michael Pittman are very, very similar. I effectively just crossed them off. But I think I would take the shots on Leggett and Kamara over Wandale, Moss, and then what you're projecting to be a mid to late 25 first, which is a one quarterback first. So if it's mid to late, that could just be a kind of, not saying it's a bad pick, but it's not as good, especially if it was super flex. So I think I'd keep the DJ Moore, Leggett, and Kamara side. I would take Kamara over Wandale and Moss for sure. And I think Leggett or 25 first is just kind of a toss up for me just because I believe in Leggett that much. But even if you don't take any of the extra added value from Kamara over Moss and Wandale, and I think you got yourself a very fair trade. I think this is even on both sides, but I think I'd take the DJ Moore, Kamara, Leggett side on this one. Very, very close, though. Great question. Nolan, 12-team superflex, start 10, 1.5 tight end premium, traded Jefferson in a late second for A.J. Brown and Rome Odunze. How much of an L did you take? I'm not really sure if you did. I mean, I'd rather have Jefferson than A.J. Brown, but from a production standpoint, they might be very similar from this year. But I would much rather have Rome Odunze than a late 25 second. And you're in a start 10, Odunze might be, a flexible candidate at some point this year, maybe not initially, but, if he grows into that offense more or if injuries happen above him. I like this trade down option. I think I'm usually not a fan of trading down at wide receiver, but when you can go from who I have as my wide receiver 1 down to my wide receiver like 6 or 7, but then pick up another top 20 wide receiver, I think that I like this tier down. Off of Jefferson. And like I said, from a production standpoint, if you're just looking at competing this year, Jefferson and A.J. Brown might not score all too differently. So I like this. I would take A.J. Brown and Rome Odunze. I don't think you took an L on this one. New setup. This has been the new setup for what is it now? Like a couple weeks. I think this is week 3 with the new setup. But yeah, we moved out of our apartment to the house that we bought. So that was at the beginning of August. So I think this is week 3 now with the new setup. But yeah, Jordan, 12 by 11, Superflex PPR, 1.5 tight end premium. Drafted best available, overfilling roster, having regrets. Help? Question mark. Yeah, best available for sure with the fact that you took the 3 quarterbacks, TJSN. Yeah, I think I would be trying to move one of those quarterbacks for a stud wide receiver. Ideally it would be Herbert from my end, but apparently people really, really hate Herbert, as I found out earlier this week. But if you can move any of those 3 quarterbacks, I think for like a top 10 guy, like if you can get an AJ Brown or a Garrett Wilson or a Puka Nacua, or even if you could trade like Herbert for Marvin Harrison Jr., I think that would greatly help your roster by giving you a top 10, top 5, potentially dynasty wide receiver. It would definitely spread out your starting lineup for sure. It would prevent you from having to sit one of those quarterbacks. You still have Daniel Jones as your QB3, which I think is fine. Running backs I think are fine. I think you really just need to see if you can move one of those quarterbacks. And a start 11, I mean, I think that you're going to be okay. It's just you got to make sure that you can fill out the rest of this roster. And maybe if you end up start competing, if you have draft capital next year, you could use maybe a second or something and get another running back or an aging wide receiver if your running backs end up doing better than you thought. But I think this is a 2025 and 2026 roster. So I would be trying to just play for then and maybe take on an extra second or an extra first next year or something like that. See how things go on, because you really are just waiting to see what happens in season. See if T. Higgins goes back to form, if JSN breaks out, if Keon Coleman can transition in the NFL. All that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where you're at. Great young team, productive struggle for sure. You just have to, it's just a waiting game now. You just have to have patience on this one. But if you can try to move one of your quarterbacks, I think that would be phenomenal. Robert, 12-team Superflex start 10. Current running backs are Cook, Warren, Singletary. Would you send Sutton in a second for B-Rob and Eckler? Would you pay anything more than that to get the deal done? Ideally, I don't really want Austin Eckler. I like it from a Brian Robinson standpoint. Like, I think I would trade Cortland Sutton for Brian Robinson. I'm comfortable doing that. But I would not trade a second for Austin Eckler. So if you can make it either a smaller deal or get somebody else instead of Austin Eckler, not sure what the other team has as an alternative, but that's how I'd be looking at it, is either making it just Sutton for B-Rob or swap out Eckler for something else. That's how I'd go about it. And Wicks will separate himself as a top wide receiver to own on the Packers this year. I am here for it. I'm definitely pro Wicks. I just don't know if he's going to have enough of an opportunity, because it seems like he is definitely playing as the at best wide receiver 3 behind Dobbs and Watson. And then Reed gets thrown in there too. Wicks just seems like he has an uphill battle with the receivers ahead of him. Not saying that I think that he's worse than those receivers. It's just what I've been seeing from training camp and preseason usage. Wicks is very clearly the third or fourth option on that team. Not to say he can't beat out the other guys, or if injuries open things up for him, definitely could, but he's got an uphill road to climb to get to that point. Alex, Addison and Pickens for Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson for sure. This is how you trade up, do a 2-for-1 at the wide receiver position, get rid of 2 guys that have upside and potential, but I think both these guys are top 30 guys. I really, really like George Pickens. I'm not so into Jordan Addison, but if you can just trade both those guys and get Garrett Wilson, who I think is going to have a phenomenal breakout year this year, I'm definitely doing this. And even if Garrett Wilson isn't your end game, I think he's much easier to springboard into somebody that you want at the top. Like, it's easier to go from Garrett Wilson into Puka or Marvin or Amon-Ra or Chase than it is to go from Addison and Pickens. And then what do you have to add on top of that to get to one of those guys? So from a value standpoint, I think it just makes sense to get Garrett Wilson, let alone the production standpoint and the roster construction aspect too. I think much better just to have Garrett Wilson. Give me Garrett. How far does JJ McCarthy drop? Rookie draft next weekend, and I'm in a total rebuild. One quarterback is early third, too early, too late. If I can stash on IR all year, great question. For one quarterback, I feel like he was already kind of a late second. So, I mean, I would take him in the early third. I think that's fine. I would take, Jalen Wright and Blake Corum and all of those other like day 2-ish wide receivers, like Leggett and Coleman and Jalen Polk, Adonai Mitchell. I would take all of those guys over JJ McCarthy first in one quarterback. But I think once you get into like the Roman Wilson, some more handcuff kind of range, I like Ray Davis a lot. I might take Ray Davis over JJ McCarthy. It's tempting, but I can understand going for JJ McCarthy there. But I think once you get into that range, then I think it makes sense to get into JJ McCarthy. And yeah, if you can stash him on IR, I don't think that's a wasted pick. I think already just the fact that his one quarterback is just devaluing him, and then because he's out all year, people might not necessarily be looking at him. I would take him in the early third. I think that's fine. I don't know if I would take him any earlier than that. It would just depend on the players that are also there. But like I said, once you get into that kind of Roman Wilson-y handcuff running back-y kind of range, I think that makes sense after Corum and Wright and Polk and Pearsall Probably the 2 tight ends. I would probably take both tight ends, Sanat and Jatavion Sanders, over JJ McCarthy too. But then after that, that's kind of where the line is. Brandon offered Olave, Pittman, Brooks, and a 26 first for CD Lamb. Is that enough to get me Lamb? I would think so. Honestly, I think that's too much. I think you're paying too much for CD Lamb at that point. Because I'm not opposed to trading Olave and Pittman for CD Lamb. But I think adding Brooks and a 26 first, I think this is just way too much. You're effectively offering him roundabouts like 5 to 6 first round picks. Like if Olave is a first and a half, Pittman is a first and a half, that's 3. Brooks is a first, and the 26 first is the first. So that's 5. Let alone if you value Olave or Pittman any more than that. I mean, that's a lot to pay for CD Lamb. And I get that it's a start 9, but that's a third of your roster right there. A third of your starting lineup for CD Lamb. And again, I'm all for the trade up at the wide receiver spot. So I would do this for Olave and Pittman. And if I had to add like a 26 second, but I'm not adding Brooks in a 26 first. I think that's way too much. I wouldn't pay that for CD Lamb. In a startup right now, I have Caleb, Kyler, Odunze. Should I take Kyron, Achane, or Trey McBride? 1.75 PPR for tight ends. Great question. I would probably take Trey McBride then. 1.75. It's between him or Devon Achane are basically the 2 guys that I would be looking at. But I'm not really a big running back guy in startups. So I would take Trey McBride. Unless for some reason you think that you can get, like, is Kyle Pitts still there? I would take Pitts over McBride. Or if you think you can get Andrews later. Also not sure what other wide receivers are still there. The fact that you already took Odunze makes me think that the wide receivers are nothing special. So I would probably I'm between Achane and McBride, and I'm leaning McBride because of the 1.75. That's a pretty hefty premium. But if you think that you can get a different tight end later, a la Andrews, or if Pitts is there, or Kincaid around later, or anything like that, then I'd probably take Achane. I'm getting so many Slack messages. What the heck? Who is talking? Theo, Dynasty Superflex, 12 by 10. Daniels early 25 first, 2 mid 25 first, and a late 25 first. Or Jefferson, Lawrence, Flowers, and Tony Pollard. Oh my God. These are the trades that I would just reject and try to make things simpler and smaller. It just gets so complicated. Props to you if you had these firsts, or to the other person offering you this to already have 425 firsts. And they got Jayden Daniels, which means they probably had the 104 this year too. Holy crap. I don't think I would do this. On either side, I don't think I would do this. Daniels and Trevor Lawrence effectively crosses out, so then you're still paying 4 firsts for Justin Jefferson, Zay Flowers, and Tony Pollard. I think when I break it down like that, I think it makes sense. So I think the winning side is technically the Jefferson Trevor Lawrence side, but I don't know if that's something that I would do. You have 4 first round picks. I don't know if that's, and then you're taking on Tony Pollard. That's weird. I'm not a big Zay Flowers fan. I just feel like this is just a trade that I wouldn't do on either side. It's way too complicated. It's you're basically cashing in all 4 firsts, or taking on a bunch of firsts. My answer to this is don't do it on either side. It's just too much. It's just too complicated. Am I buying JJ McCarthy? Absolutely. I would definitely be buying JJ McCarthy. I would, if you can get him for anything less than a first in Superflex, I think that's an absolute smash. If you could trade away, like if the person who had JJ McCarthy might have been relying on him for somewhat production, or they're looking for production this year, and you can trade away guys like a Deshaun Watson or a Baker Mayfield type quarterback, I think that is all a smash. Not saying that you can do that or that's his current price, but I'm just saying, like, if you can do that right now, I think anybody in the Deshaun Watson, Bo Nix, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield kind of range is where I would be looking at to sell one of those guys for JJ McCarthy. If you don't need the production, from the quarterback this year, or if you have extra quarterbacks, I think it totally makes sense. It probably makes more sense from a buying standpoint just to give a pick. I think I would probably pay. I probably would pay a future first round pick for him, especially if you're a contender and that you think that it's a late 25 first, because you're probably not going to get a better quarterback than McCarthy from next year's class. There's arguably, I mean, you could argue as of right now that JJ McCarthy would have been the QB1 in next year's class. Comparing with Shador Sanders or Drew Aller or Quinn Ewers, I think it's a toss up right now, depending on how they play then in college this year. But in Superflex, those guys, if they're worth it, are going to go, top 5, top 7, top 8. And if you're paying a late first round pick for JJ McCarthy, then I think that you could pull him away for cheaper than what he would be if he was actually healthy with just the late first. Again, anything less than a first or swapping out quarterbacks or doing anything like that, or I think that is a very good price to buy JJ McCarthy at right now. And I'd be trying to do that if you can, if it makes sense for your team, or if you have the extra capital or assets on a contender to do that too, because then that could help you further down the road. Just stash them on IR. Be told 23. Hey, Addison, happy Friday. Happy Friday to you, man. 2 offers that you've received. One is London for McBride and a 1.5 tight end premium. Other offer is Love for Herbert and a 25 third. I would take Jordan Love in the first one, and I would take Drake London in the first one. The 1.5 makes it tempting, but 1.5 isn't necessarily enough of a premium for me to lean over to the tight end position. I would take London over McBride already in just normal non-tight end premium. The 1.5 isn't really enough to sway me. It's a conversation, but I don't think it's enough to move over to Trey McBride. So I would take Drake London and I would take Jordan Love in the 2 sides. Torsten. The Dak owners in rebuild Sunday is rookie draft. Do I rob him with 4? Yes. I'm assuming this is one quarterback because this would never get done in Superflex. But even in a one quarterback league, I would take Dak Prescott over 4 third-round picks because then you have an every week starter. So, yeah, give me Dak. Jonathan was here last week. Asked about the Gibbs ETN trade. Ended up moving Gibbs, Kirk, Deshaun, Bateman for ETN, Addison, 2 firsts and a third. Ooh. No, I like this a lot. I love the way that this ended up. So, in a one quarterback league, Deshaun Watson is just kind of meh. Rashad Bateman, just kind of not really anything. Like, I think you can toss out a 25 third for Deshaun Watson. And then Bateman is just kind of a throw in to get the deal done. So effectively, it doesn't make sense. I would take the 2 players over the third, but I'm more or less for the larger picture of this trade. I'm just going to cross all that out to where I would take Gibbs. I would trade Gibbs for ETN in a first. I'd take ETN in a first over Jahmyr Gibbs. And then I would take Adonai in a first over Christian Kirk. So yeah, this is a phenomenal deal. I absolutely love what you did here. And then if you're competing with ETN still, then you can move one of those first for a different wide receiver or package some other stuff together. Maybe you can get, like a Michael Pittman for the Adonai and the 25 first. I didn't mean to use the same teammates, but, or, Nico for Adonai and 25 first, Waddle or Ayuk right now. Or any of those kind of wide receivers. If you can do that, then you effectively just moved Gibbs and Kirk for ETN and insert wide receiver here and another first round pick. That is, you're just messing around with your league right now at that point. So this is phenomenal. I absolutely love this deal. Way to go, Jonathan. Ken, between Jayden Reed and JSN, who do you prefer? JSN. What do you think a trade around these two would look like? I think I would need a second round pick with Jayden Reed to move off of JSN. There's just so much. There's a lot of names on each of these 2 teams, but JSN was a better prospect. He was drafted higher. I think that he has a better opportunity to see more significant volume than Jayden Reed, because I think that he could bypass Tyler Lockett this year, especially if they're all on the field at the same time, or even as the year goes on, if JSN starts getting more snaps and reps over Tyler Lockett in 2 wide receiver sets, then that's just I think that's just way better. JSN, I think, just has a better pedigree and future than Jayden Reed. So I would take JSN for sure over Jayden Reed. And like I said, I'd probably need a second, like a 25 or a 26 second to move off of JSN for Jayden Reed. And even then, I don't even know if that would make me move off of JSN. It probably would, but it'd just kind of be like, what's the point for me at that point? So I'm taking JSN. Jamie, what's up, man? Welcome into the chat. Joe, saw the JJ trade talk video with Russ yesterday in a superflex lead, and I'm loaded. JJ owner had Tua and McCarthy at quarterback. What would you recommend? I don't know. I don't know if there's. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I did not look at the chat farther up. A Rich, Herbert, Purdy. Thinking something like Herbert and Puka for JJ. That's too much. What should I add for McCarthy to try to get the stack? Oh, Herbert and Puka for even that's not enough. If it was Herbert and DJ Moore for Justin Jefferson and McCarthy, I think I would do that. Puka is too high. Wilson's too high. Chase is too high. If you basically, I think I would throw out Herbert and his choice of DJ Moore or DK Metcalf for Jefferson and McCarthy. I think that's how I would approach it. Or Hawk if he wants Hawk too, because then you don't have the triple stack or just the double stack of all the Vikings players. If he wants Hawk as well, especially if he's rebuilding, it might be good. Might be beneficial for him to take on Hawk if he's not going to really produce because he's going to miss half the year. And then what's he going to do the following year with Sam Darnold? So I'd start there. I'd do Herbert and his choice of DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, or TJ Hawkinson for Jefferson and McCarthy. That's where I would start with and see where that goes. MSJ Worthy not available due to weird taxi squad rules that we did. I only have one fantasy relevant running back at the moment. Would you trade one? Is that 101 for James Cook in the 104? I'm assuming this is a one quarterback league. Maybe is this one quarterback? If this is one quarterback, I'm not doing this at all. And even I'm not doing this at all, regardless of the format. But I'm I'm not doing this with Marvin Harrison Jr. And I would not do this with Caleb Williams in a superflex either. I don't want to mortgage my elite assets and players to fill out my starting lineup, especially with a player like James. I'm not a huge James Cook fan. I actually just made a video that is posting next week for 4 for 4 talking about why I would not draft James Cook for 2024. So I'm not a big fan of the process, and I'm also not a big fan of the player that you took or player that you're trying to get either for James Cook. I would just keep 101 and be happy with Marvin Harrison Jr. Or Caleb, or unless there's something that I'm not understanding with the fact that it's weird taxi squad rules. I hate weird taxi squad rules. Thoughts on Chubb in the 13th round of a Dynasty startup? Probably not. MHJ is not available. Is this a Devi league? So it's even worse then. I'm definitely not doing this then because then you're trading away neighbors for Cook and I mean, you're probably not Cook and BTJ. Because it's even worse because then it's effectively you're trading the 102 for Cook and the 105, and I would take Malik Neighbors over that. I'd take Neighbors there. Will, sorry, back to you. Thoughts on Chubb in the 13th round of a startup? I mean, it's fine. I'm really not a huge fan of it. I don't like taking players like Chubb in a startup just because A, he's an old running back. who's probably not going to give you much production this year. So like the majority of his value is just not there because he's not going to produce. Like it's different if you took James Conner at that point because Conner is going to produce. Whereas Nick Chubb, I don't think is really going to give you all that much this year. Coming back from the knee injury, sharing time with Jerome Ford. Then he's a free agent at the end of the year. I just don't really know what Nick Chubb's going to give you. Like I feel like it's very similar to like if you were to draft like Dalvin Cook or Ezekiel Elliott in the 13th round like 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Like that looks horrible now. And I'm not to say that there's a bunch of amazing things going on in the 13th round, but there's probably better players with better trajectories than Nick Chubb in the 13th. And it's just not really a player that I want to draft in a startup. I'd rather take a young wide receiver or a running back that's actually that I feel good about is going to actually produce for me this year, or a tight end or a quarterback or whatever it is. Anybody else. Tacky T, I'm a contender and have a trade offer sent away Kyron and Gino for Achane. Gino is your QB4. Oh. I understand this from both sides, to be honest with you. If you truly believe that Devon Achane is going to have a massive breakout year, which I kind of do, I feel comfortable doing this, especially with Gino as your QB4. But I understand it from the other person's point of view. They probably need Gino, and they probably don't see that much of a difference between Kyron and Achane in terms of they both had massive production last year, both fought with injuries throughout the majority of the year. So as long as you don't believe that Corum is going to like just sweep Kyron Williams under the rug, you know, like that phrase didn't make sense, whatever. As long as Corum's not going to steal Kyron's lunch money, you know, then it feels like a pretty even trade on both sides. But I think if you truly believe that Achane's going to have a massive season, I think that's fine, especially if you don't need Gino if he's your QB4. Although it might depend on who your QB3 is. But I'm assuming just because you named Gino as your QB4, that means he's probably your QB3 is probably better than Gino. Here for the memes. Happy Friday. What's up, my man? Thank you for the super chat. What does one do with the 3-10-1 quarterback leagues? Man, I hate one quarterback values and rookies. At the 3-10, if you could draft Ray Davis, Javon Baker, Jatavion Sanders, Bucky Irving, Braylon Allen. That would be my list. that would be, those would be like 5 names that I'd be looking at the 3-10. I think one of them probably makes it to you. Especially with some of the training camp hype. I could see training camp hype like bumping up some of the other guys or maybe bumping up other players in which one of those guys drop down. But those would be like the 5 names that I would be looking at the 3-10. Maybe if you want to also include in like I'm fine with like a Rasheen Ali, a Will Shipley, Audric Estime. Like I'm fine with all those guys too. It probably ends up being a handcuff running back for me, but if it's also Jatavion Sanders or Javon Baker, I like that too. But those are kind of the names that I'd be looking at the 3-10 in a one quarterback league and just see if any of them make it down to you. Appreciate the super chat again. Once again, man. Thanks for coming back in here for the memes. All right, Jordan, 12 by 11, Superflex. You think Herbert for Wilson straight up? Heard about your Herbert Twitter fiasco. Let the haters hate. Yeah, I think that would be fine. Because you have an excess of quarterbacks and you'd still be totally fine. It would basically be like if you were to go back into your startup and just draft Garrett Wilson instead of Justin Herbert. I feel like that's pretty solid in terms of both of their ADPs right now. Maybe it's slightly higher on Garrett Wilson. Maybe it's slightly lower on Justin Herbert or around the same. But I would take Garrett Wilson. I would trade Justin Herbert for Garrett Wilson in the situation that you have with the quarterbacks and roster that you have. PJ, BTJ, or Rashad White? Ooh. So tugging on my heartstrings with Brian Thomas Jr. In that same video that I talk about not to draft James Cook, I also talk about not drafting Rashad White. So I would take Brian Thomas Jr. over Rashad White but it's very close. I think it's a decent conversation as long as Rachaad White can maintain the RB1 role in Tampa. But I think he's going to have a worse year this year. So I would take Brian Thomas Jr. You would still have 4 firsts left over after making that Justin Jefferson deal. How many firsts do you have, man? Is that including 2026? Holy smokes. Just the fact that you had 4 25s and then you still have 4 left. My only question for that would be, because you have so many firsts, I would love to see what your actual roster looks like, because you might be pushing yourself too forward into a competing window that you're not ready for. So if you still have, so like the fact that you have 8 first round picks over, I'm going to assume the next 2 years, then I'm curious on what your roster looks like, because I'm worried that you might not be ready to compete yet. Even if that deal goes through and you get Justin Jefferson and you get Tony Pollard and Zay Flowers and stuff, like I could see how that would definitely help. But I feel like you might be able to do more individually with those firsts than just trading them all in for JJ and Flowers and stuff too. That could be another way to look at it. I think from a value standpoint, the Justin Jefferson side won, though, after we broke all that down. But it's a big cash out for sure. Zamir White or Brian Robinson in Dynasty? I would take Brian Robinson, because I actually believe that he's A, going to be good, B, is actually good, and C, will maintain the starting role for more than the 2024 season. Or maintain the starting role by week 12. So I'll take Brian Robinson. Pickens or JSN? I would take Pickens. If Ayuk is not traded there, I would take JSN the other way around. So I actually believe that Brandon Ayuk is going to re-sign in San Francisco, so I'd probably still take Pickens. But if you want to remove that doubt, I'm totally fine taking JSN. I think that they're both totally fine. Bowers or Pitts in Dynasty? I would take Kyle Pitts, because I believe the breakout season is coming this year. Again, very close, but I would take Kyle Pitts. Caleb Williams or Jordan Love in Dynasty? I would take Caleb Williams, but this is also extremely close. And I understand that if you want to remove if you want more solid, secure production this year, then you could take Jordan Love. But I think just like beyond that, Caleb is a much better quarterback with much better wide receivers and is actually like the real deal. So I would take Caleb, but again, it's very close. This is kind of like Pickens or JSN. It's like, which one do you believe in more? Then I'm totally fine taking that one. Or if you want to remove some risk, totally fine taking that one too. But I stand by Brian Robinson and I stand by Kyle Pitts. Aussie Hop. I have someone else in leagues 25 first. That's a top 3 team. My quarterbacks are Watson, Rodgers, and Bryce Young. Would you pay that first for Justin Jefferson, JJ McCarthy with that quarterback room? Yes, I would, because I think that, again, this is kind of like what we were talking about, and I'm assuming that's where you probably got this from, maybe. But I think that JJ McCarthy, you're not going to get a better quarterback in next year's class than JJ McCarthy with a late 2025 first. And especially with your quarterback room right now, with Deshaun Watson having question marks of, is he still even good? Bryce Young having question marks of, is he NFL material? Aaron Rodgers question marks of age, Achilles, retirement. I think investing into JJ McCarthy for that late 25 first would make a lot of sense. Now, if you could get him for less than that first, like if you have a couple seconds that you can scrape together and then throw that first or keep that first instead, absolutely, I'd be willing to do that. But at the end of the day, if it takes that late 2025 first that you believe is going to be 110, 111, 112 in a superflex league, then I would trade that for JJ McCarthy. Matt, in a total rebuild, I have 101 and I'm considering Neighbors over Harrison. Am I crazy? And which do you prefer in that scenario? I don't think you're necessarily crazy. Maybe a little bit. I would take Marvin Harrison Jr. I just think that he's the better wide receiver in a better situation and is going to be the better guy in this year, next year, down the road. I would take Marvin Harrison Jr. Guffey, I have Burrow, Cousins, and at the 112 in Superflex 12 team tight end premium league. Am I always going with Penix? Or do you like Nix's situation better? I'm going with Bo Nix. A, he's the actual starter. B, I think that he has the potential to be better than Michael Penix. I understand you want maybe like the handcuff to Kirk Cousins so that you would still be, you'd still get a starting quarterback if anything were to happen to Kirk Cousins. But I think you still have a starting quarterback anyway with Bo Nix. So I would take Bo Nix, and he looked pretty solid in preseason. So I would take Bo Nix instead of Penix at the 112. I have Penix a few picks behind Nix anyway in my Superflex rookie rankings. So I'd take Bo Nix. James, hey, what would you add on top of St. Brown to get Justin Jefferson now with the McCarthy injury? Jefferson owner wants to save for production with St. Brown, and I'm in a rebuild. Can you get what would you add on top of St. Brown? So here's the problem. I would not add the Amon-Ra St. Brown to get to Justin Jefferson because you are in a rebuild. That is condensing your assets down into just and honestly, I have Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown in the same tier. So they're effectively the same for me. The only way that this would benefit you is if you got something on top of Justin Jefferson to trade away Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would not add to Amon-Ra to go get Justin Jefferson. I would tell that to this if you were contending, or especially if you're rebuilding. I don't think it makes sense to do this as a rebuilder. But even as a contender, I would not move from St. Brown to Justin Jefferson. I'd rather have Amon-Ra if you already have Amon-Ra. And the only way that I would move off of him is if you got something attached with Justin Jefferson. Doesn't have to be anything majorly big. Like, it doesn't got to be a first. But anything extra to help you with the rebuild on top of JJ, that's the only way he's getting Amon-Ra St. Brown. Took over an Orphan team for the first time. Superflex 12 team start 9. Team had Bijan and Gibbs. Receivers were disgusting after AJ Brown and Deontay. Moved Bijan, Pat Freiermuth, and Shakir for Neighbors, Dell, BTJ, and Burton. Wow. Man, that is a phenomenal deal. As a potential reload / rebuild, but also just from a value standpoint, getting rid of, I don't think that Freiermuth and Shakir are all that much in this deal. But you effectively traded Bijan Robinson for 3 first-round picks and Neighbors, Dell, and Brian Thomas Jr., and you got like you moved fun flyers and Freiermuth and Shakir, moved them over to another fun flyer and Jermaine Burton. So I think this is a phenomenal deal. You did fantastic, and I think people would take, like, there's an argument that people would take Malik Neighbors over Bijan Robinson straight up in Dynasty, let alone the fact that you added Tank Dell and Brian Thomas Jr. That's phenomenal. Holy crap, dude. Has everyone hit that like button yet? If not, please do. Thank you, Jamie. Jamie is my like button sheriff. K-Mac, yo, what's up, my man? Welcome in. Mike, hey, Addison, how's it going, man? What is your approach to a running back in one quarterback as a contender? It doesn't really change all that much from a superflex standpoint from one quarterback to superflex. Like, I still want to, a lot of stuff happening in my brain all at once, and I was trying to say everything. Hold on, let me step back for a second. Being that it's a one quarterback league, that lowers the number of valuable positions down from 2 to 1. So you don't have quarterbacks as a super valuable position. The wide receivers are now the valuable position. But what I think I end up seeing more with one quarterback leagues is that you probably have more starters. So I still want to be smashing and stacking the wide receiver position and then fill in running backs later on after the fact. I'm more comfortable to do a hero running back approach in a dynasty league, in a one quarterback league. But I also whenever I do that, I still just I look and I see like a Gibbs or a JT or somebody like that. And I'm like, man, I could have been like a different wide receiver. That could have been Garrett Wilson or Malik Neighbors or Jalen Waddle or Puka or somebody like that, instead of one of those running backs. So I still have FOMO whenever I draft a hero running back in one quarterback leagues, or I see people that draft like that. So I still want to smash the wide receiver position, but the running backs I'm become more available to draft for me because you don't have to worry about the quarterback position either. I think in a one quarterback league, I prioritize tight end a little bit more just because they might be bumping up more in terms of value. So if you could, while you're smashing wide receivers, then also get an elite tight end and a Andrews Pitts, kind of player, then I would do that at the expense of the running back position too. Um, and then again, just fill in running backs after the fact. There's a lot of really good productive running backs that are going late in startups or cheap in trades that are going to help you, that allow you to stack wide receivers and then fill them in. Like you can get Monty or B-Rob or James Conner or Aaron Jones. You could get even like Najee would be interesting from a contender standpoint, cheaper than going for a more top end running back at the expense of a wide receiver. Hopefully that made sense. But that's kind of how I approach it. And just running back in general, and then a little bit in the one quarterback standpoint. Thanks for your insight. I'm now considering moving Olave for Ladd and 25 first, and we'll ask for a 26 second. Owner also has Waddle and Benson, who I'm interested in, one of the three in return. I don't like Ladd. I'm a huge fan of moving off of Chris Olave, but I don't like Ladd McConkey either. If you could trade Olave for Waddle in a 26 second, I think that's an absolute smash. I would take Waddle over Olave. So maybe that's not realistic, but if you can do that, that'd be fantastic. And not even worry about the 25 first. Benson would be fun too. So you could see maybe if you could add to Olave to get Waddle and Benson. But I would keep Olave over Ladd in a first. But if you can move Olave for Waddle, I think that's a much better deal. Finally got you live on a Friday. What's up, my man? What are your thoughts on the price for Trevor Lawrence? I was looking to buy low on JJ for T-Law. I don't know if I would go that far. You'd have to have a pretty big plus on top of Justin Jefferson to move off of. No, I keep saying Justin Jefferson, JJ McCarthy. It'd have to be a pretty big plus to move off of Lawrence for JJ McCarthy. Like it's more than a first. I would need more than a first round pick with JJ for Lawrence. Possibly even 2 firsts. Part of that is the devaluation of JJ McCarthy, but also, this is so roster dependent because I don't know what direction that you're moving into. I assume if you're looking at buying low on JJ and you're trying to use Lawrence to do it, that you're probably rebuilding. But even then, like I would need at least a first round pick. Maybe it's not 2, but at least a first round pick to move off of Trevor Lawrence for JJ McCarthy. How many times am I going to say Justin Jefferson? John with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, John. Can you rank these guys for Dynasty? Estimate Jaleel, Tolbert, Yoshua, Tracy, Corley. Oh boy. So number 1 would be McLaughlin. Number 2 would be Tolbert and Yosivas. I would cut both of them, so I'm not even worried about either one of those guys. Tolbert maybe is interesting because it's Brandon Cooks injury, but I'm really not worried about either one of them. They're both very clearly last on this list. Probably even a tier below the rest of these guys. Jaleel, I think, is very easily the top ranked guy. And then the other 3, maybe because of Tracy's injury, you drop him down and you'd rather have Estime and Corley. I think I would go McLaughlin, Corley, Estimate, Tracy. I think that would be my 4. And then I'm not really worried about Tolbert and Yosivas, but that would be the order then too. Jaleel, Corley, Estimate, Tracy, Tolbert, Yosivas. Yosivas. Interesting group of guys though. But yeah, that's how I would go about it to rank those guys. If you have anybody else in there, I think that there are a lot better players than Tolbert and Yosivas for sure that you could throw into here. But I appreciate the super chat. Thank you so much, man. And yeah, if you have any more players that you want thrown in there, we can throw them in there. Gotta go back up. Chat is blowing up. Appreciate all you guys for being in here. Good response to my RB question. Thank you very much. Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you. I'm glad I could help. Gambit. Fantastic superhero, by the way. 2024 has been a good year for Gambit. One quarterback, 12 by 10, half PPR. When do you move off of a running back like Jonathan Taylor? Have always preferred wide receiver over running back. Honestly, in your situation, I'd probably keep Jonathan Taylor. Like, you are in a very good competitive window right now that Jonathan Taylor probably has more value to you than a lot of other teams in your league, to where you might not get good enough trade value back. The only way that I would really move off of Jonathan Taylor is if you get another top 10 dynasty wide receiver, really. And I don't know if there's going to be many other teams that are willing to do that. Like, the rebuilding teams are not going to be willing to do that. And then you're going to be trading with another contender. You're going to be trading Jonathan Taylor to another contender. And that might be beneficial for you in terms of the long run. But I'm not really opposed to keeping Jonathan Taylor right now, just because I think that he's going to be a top 10 fantasy running back this year. And with the competitive window that you're in right now, I don't really see why you would move off of him, let alone, like I said, like, there's a bunch of teams in your league that probably don't value Jonathan Taylor as high as you would, or as high as you should, maybe is a better way to say that. So I would, again, the only way I'm moving Jonathan Taylor is if you get another top 10 wide receiver. Like, I wouldn't move JT at this point for Waddle or London or Ayuk. Like, I would need, you already have Garrett Wilson and Puka. Those are the two guys. But, like, I would need AJ Brown, or I would need Malik Neighbors, or pay up to get Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, that's the way that I would move about it. But I wouldn't be concerned about it right now. Maybe in a year or two, or after this season, that you could look at it, especially next offseason or next summer, when teams are kind of figuring out if they are in a competitive window or not. Maybe they want a running back like JT that might raise his value next year, to match where you kind of are now, I think. So I wouldn't move off of him just yet. Take him into the season, start competing, go win a championship, man. K-Max, 16-team Superflex. Ooh, start 9, rebuilding, late rookie draft. Picking 113. Who are you thinking to add? Ladworthy, Coleman, or Benson? Have no running backs set at quarterback. I will say, as a caveat to this, if Bo Nix is there at the 113, I would take Bo Nix over all of these guys, just given the fact that it's a 16-team Superflex. I know you said that you're set at quarterback, but the value for the quarterback is tremendous, to where I could understand if Bo Nix gets taken ahead of that just because of the fact that he's a starting QB. He probably will. But I felt like I had to say that if Bo Nix is there at 113, I would take him over all these guys. The way that I would rank these four is Worthy, Benson, Coleman, McConkey is the way that I would rank them. So I would take Coleman over Coleman or McConkey. Might be the one that gets people the most, but I feel like, especially as a rebuilding team, you want to shoot for that upside. I don't think Ladd McConkey has that much upside, and I don't think he has anywhere near the upside that Keon Coleman has as a potential wide receiver 1 for Josh Allen. Worthy is at the very top of this list. Benson, I think, is just a good name to have, especially if you have no running backs. I don't think he's going to hurt you this year and going to hurt your chances of being at the top of the draft this year. For 2025, like, as a rebuilding team, you want to be as close to 101 or get 101 as possible. I don't think Benson's going to hurt your chances of getting that, because I don't think he's going to be that productive, but could help you in 2025 and beyond, or at least gain value if James Conner were to get hurt or be traded or let walk in free agency next year. So I would take Benson second, then Coleman, then McConkey. But Bo Nix ahead of all of them, just given the format. If he's there. Tyler, Neighbors or Tyreek Hill in a startup? I have my opinion is Tyreek. Want to hear your thoughts. In a startup, I would take Malik Neighbors, just because if you draft Tyreek Hill, then you have just told yourself and the rest of your league that you are competing for 2024. Not to say that that's a bad thing and that we don't want to be building rosters to compete for 2024, but the rest of your startup decisions are going to be made around the fact that you are competing in 2024 because you drafted Tyreek Hill. Whereas if you draft Malik Neighbors, that gives you the flexibility to take some younger guys, to wait on running back, to take best player available. You still have fluidity in your startup with the rest of your draft picks after the fact, to where maybe you compete in 2024. That wouldn't be a bad thing. If you compete in 2024 with Malik Neighbors as one of your top picks, you have a phenomenal roster that's built for now and for the future. But if you don't compete, then that's totally fine. because you still have Malik Neighbors. He's fantastic for the future. If you draft Tyreek Hill, you are contending in 2024, and you have to build your roster out in that mindset. And the danger of that is that if you don't win in 2024 and then some of the players get us hurt, some of the, you took Keenan Allen instead of Keon Coleman or Lad McConkey or something like that. You took Aaron Jones instead of Jalen Wright. Like, those are the decisions that you possibly could have made because you were competing in 2024 and you're looking at points. And now those players have all lost value because they're a year older. You didn't win. So then the whole thing was all for naught anyway. And Tyreek Hill himself has lost value too, because now he's a year older and possibly maybe not as productive this year. There's a whole bunch of risk and catastrophe that could happen if you draft your team to compete for 2024. That's why I would take Malik Neighbors over Tyreek, because it gives you the fluidity to compete, but also the fluidity to not compete, but still be good and set for 2025 and beyond. That's how we go. Taking Neighbors at 102 in a one quarterback rookie draft. Really desire a running back, but I don't currently have a shot at Brooks or Benson. I have Anthony Richardson and Justin Herbert. Should I trade one for the 104 one? I would trade Justin Herbert in a heartbeat for that. In a one quarterback league. Yeah, I would trade Justin Herbert in a heartbeat for that. I would also probably trade Anthony Richardson for that, but Richardson just has so much upside. That I would take Jonathan Brooks over Anthony Richardson. So there's that. But if you could trade Herbert for one of those picks and get Brooks, then that would be great too. Or if you trade Herbert and get Brian Thomas Jr. or Brock Bowers, I think that's a win anyway, even if it's not a running back. Torsten, 1 second, man. Gotta hydrate. A lot of questions, a lot of talking. Saw your trade video, 12-team Superflex start 9. Due to my league once, 25 first and second. And Gino for his Jared Goff. I thought Goff would be a cheap trade target, but this seems very rich for me. We both have been bamboozled by the fact that we thought that Goff would be a cheaper trade target. This does seem a bit rich. I would be willing to do a 25 first and a second, or a 25 first and Gino. If you could drop one of those two off of this trade, I'd be willing to do it. But I wouldn't do all three of them for just Jared Goff. Or if you throw in something, that's on the Jared Goff side to even it out, that's around like a second round pick value or around Geno Smith's value, then I would be willing to do that too, because that's effectively the same thing. You're just getting something extra on top. But all three of those pieces for just Goff, I think, is a little much. Either slash one of those pieces off or add something to Goff that equates to one of the other two pieces in the second and GM. What do you see as T-Law's value? Asking because I have BTJ and wondering if I should tier down or up. If so, to who? So T-Law is, I believe, a borderline Dynasty QB1 or potentially a Dynasty QB1. I don't do like startup rankings or anything like that. I have like my top if I sat down and actually ranked them, I could tell you where they are, but Lawrence would be in that kind of range. I probably wouldn't tier down for Trevor Lawrence because I think there's a tier gap after him, basically, unless you're getting something major on top. But then you're going to be losing age for probably very similar production, or you just might not be getting a very good quarterback on top of it. Trading up then would be a good option, but I wouldn't trade Lawrence, and I wouldn't trade up from Lawrence to Burrow, or I wouldn't go to Dak. Or I want somebody that has more dynamic ability or maybe a rushing ability or something that Lawrence doesn't offer you. That I think that's where Burrow, I think, is very similar to Trevor Lawrence, as is Dak or Justin Herbert or any of those kind of just like pocket passers. You know what I mean? To where if you trade up from Lawrence and you go get Kyler, or if you believe in Anthony Richardson, or if you go get Lamar, or if you can go and get or side grade to Jayden Daniels, or even go from Lawrence to Daniels plus, then I think that that's a win. But Lawrence, I think, is very similar to a bunch of other guys in that kind of upper echelon range. I would only really be looking to move up from Lawrence, not down, unless you went down to Jayden Daniels. Rusty, Ayuk in a 25 second for Pitts and a 25 first. 1 point PPR. No tight end premium though. I would probably. I think I'd take Pitts in a 25 first on this. Even in a non-tight end premium, I think I would take Pitts in a 25 first. This is kind of like a sandwich deal. I would take Ayuk over a 25 first, but I would take Pitts over a 25 second. If you need the starting tight end and you can afford the loss of Ayuk at the wide receiver position, I think it's a good trade to go and get Kyle Pitts, and you get a first on top to even it out. Very fair trade on both sides. So it really is just probably roster dependent at this point. But I'd lean Kyle Pitts in 25 first. More so if you definitely need the starting tight end. Brendan, 12-team Superflex, full PBR, start 11, rebuilding. Quarterback room is Richardson, Caleb, Bryce Young, and Deshaun Watson. One team is pressing me for A-Rich. Offered an early to mid first, 25 third, and 27 first. Is this enough? Nope. No, it is not. Because what's going to end up happening is that you're going to hope that 25 first is early, and then you're going to hope to probably get a quarterback that's relatively the same as Anthony Richardson or a wide receiver who probably isn't as valuable as Anthony Richardson, especially if Anthony Richardson does do well this year. His value is going to be way higher than this. And the 27 first doesn't do anything for you right now. That's just kicking the can so far down the road that you can't even see it. And then what does a 25 third do for you? So you need way more for Anthony Richardson than this. This is not enough. I wouldn't even do this for Caleb either. This would be something that would be more interesting for Bryce Young or Deshaun Watson. Drop the 27 first, trade just the 25 first for Young or Watson. They need a lot more for Anthony Richardson. YWL 12-team Superflex, half PPR, start 10. Cousins and Nico, or a 25 first and 27 first. Nico. Cousins and Nico. I would take Nico over 25 first, and I would take Cousins over 2027 first. 2027 first apparently have become available in leagues, and now they're interesting to trade. I'm taking Cousins and Nico pretty easily in this over 2 first-round picks. Athlete critique: own Laporta and Kelsey, conflicted on holding Kelsey for the positional advantage they both provide, or to trade him for tier down assets. No tight end premium, can't get a first for him. Well, I think the answer lies in that last sentence. If you can't get a first for Travis Kelsey, then I don't think it's worth trading him. It would be more beneficial, I think, to trade Laporta because he's going to get you so much more value back. But if you can't get a first for Travis Kelsey, there's no point in trading him, because then that means that your league already doesn't value him to where they probably should. At least as contenders. Contenders should be willing to pay a first, I think, for Travis Kelsey. And if I'd imagine the fact that you have Laporta and Kelsey, that you are probably looking at contending this year. So then you're going to be trading Kelsey to a contender to compete against you. And if you're not getting a first round pick to do that, then it's not worth it. It's not worth the potential of losing to Travis Kelsey in the playoffs. It's essentially what it comes down to. So I'd hold on to both or try to move Laporta because he's probably going to net you a lot more. Oliver, what are you willing to pay for McCarthy on a rebuilding roster? Late 2025 first in Superflex leagues. Anything less than that would be fantastic. In one quarterback leagues, I would pay a late 25 second, maybe. I think is fine. I'd pay a late 25 second, or less than that would be great too. It's around the range that I'm looking at for McCarthy. Have you seen any McCarthy trades since he got hurt? Been floating some stuff out there, but no deals yet. Let's check. I have the DLF trade finder saved. JJ McCarthy. I haven't seen any on Twitter. Let's see. Ooh, a lot of trades. When did he get hurt? That news come out every day, just blends into the next day. To miss season after surgery. This was on the 14th. Okay, so we have probably about 24 trades in the trade finder since the 14th. So I'll let the trade news digest. So we'll go since yesterday. And in a Superflex league, he was traded for Cousins and Zay Flowers. He was traded for Deshaun Watson straight up. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields straight up. Him and Javon Baker were traded for Zay Flowers. He was traded for Aaron Rodgers straight up. George Kittle. straight up. That's in a tight end premium league. Him and Brock Bowers were traded for CJ Stroud. Wow. That's also a tight end. That's a 2 PPR tight end premium league, though. So McCarthy and Brock Bowers for CJ Stroud and 2 tight end premium. And then the other one is McCarthy for Stafford in a second. So those have all been done since yesterday. And if we look at some of the other ones since the 14th, since kind of like when the news broke out, him for Devontae Adams, him and Bijan for Jayden Daniels in a second. Holy crap. A 25 second in 1 quarterback leagues, him and Xavier Worthy for Rome Odunze, him for Drake May straight up, a 25 first for McCarthy and a 25 second. Nice. Deshaun Watson straight up, George Pickens straight up. So that's what the DLF Trade Finder says about JJ McCarthy over the past couple of days. Jared, 10-team Superflex, half PPR. Would you trade Cup for Rice, borderline contending, middle of the league? If you think that you're borderline contending, I would take Rashee Rice because, again, that gives you the flexibility of maybe Rice still produces this year and his value will go up then at the end of the year, whereas Cup, his value is probably not going to go up because of his age. So Rice gives you the fluidity of going in either direction. Whereas Cup, I feel like if you keep Cup, then you're going to push yourself towards contending. And if you're not necessarily ready to contend, that might hurt your roster in the long run. So I would trade Cup for Rice. Now, if you want to hold out on this deal and make some other moves, depending on what assets and stuff that you have to then put yourself in a better position to contend to where you feel more confident about it, then you could probably keep Cooper Kupp. But I think as of right now, if you're already like, I don't really know where this roster is going to go, I'd probably just take Rashee Rice. And this goes into Tyler's question. If you're a contender, you'll pay a first for trade, or you'll trade a first for Kelsey, but won't draft Tyreek over Neighbors in a startup. If I'm a contender, I have assets, and if you want my hill, I need Neighbors in a first. So this shows the difference between startups versus trades, which is why I gave you the advice that I did, because you were in a startup. In a startup, your league is entirely fresh. So I want the fluidity to compete or not in a startup. Whereas in trades, it's very different because your league is already very established. You probably already have a contending roster. So that's why startup value doesn't equate to trade value. It's not a 1-for-1. So that's the difference between the two. That's why, as a contending roster, I would trade a first-round pick for Travis Kelce. But in a startup, I would not take Tyreek Hill over Malik Neighbors. And we're not even going to mention the fact that you would need Neighbors in a first for Tyreek Hill. I think that's ridiculous. So, yeah. Jod, 12-team, 1 quarterback, half PPR, start 9. Would you trade T. Higgins and Achane for Jamar Chase? Yes, I would. Yep. This is kind of pretty similar to the tier up at the wide receiver, except that you've replaced Achane. You replaced the wide receiver with Achane, and I feel like that's very similar. Wide receivers around Achane's value, I would trade with T. Higgins for Jamar Chase. So, yeah, I think this is a fantastic. In a 1 quarterback league, Jamar Chase is a top 5, top 3 potential asset in that league. Give me Jamar Chase. Would you do Marvin Harrison for CJ Stroud, Superflex League in a rebuild? Yes, I would trade Marvin Harrison for CJ Stroud. I think that in a rebuild, in Superflex, I basically want to get my quarterbacks down. That's like step number 1A. Wide receivers are 1B. They're the 2 most valuable positional assets in Superflex leagues. Quarterbacks outweighing the wide receivers. So I would take CJ Stroud and then potentially cross off the quarterback position and then start rebuilding your wide receivers. Sean, 10-team, 1 quarterback PPR. I'm looking to win now. Olave, Coleman, 2 late 25 firsts, or Christian McCaffrey, Odunze, and a late 25 third. Ooh, interesting. I will take Christian McCaffrey. If your roster is like ready to go, and you're not like, the only way that I would say probably not do Christian McCaffrey is if you were like Jared. Jared was the one who asked about Cup or Rice, where he said that he was a borderline contender, middle of the pack kind of team. Not really sure. Maybe that it could go either direction. If you're in that phase of contending or looking to win now, I probably wouldn't do this move. But if you're like, yeah, I'm a top 3 team right now, and then I get Christian McCaffrey, then I would make that deal. Because Coleman in a late 25 first for Odunze, I would take Odunze. And then Olave and another late 25 first for CMC as a contender. Getting CMC, that'd be really, really fun. So, yeah, I would make this deal if you are that much of a contender. Matt, 1 second. Got to hydrate. So much talking. Wide receiver room is set for sure. Yeah. Take Christian McCaffrey, go win a championship, and have a lot of fun doing that. Matt, start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, half PPR. I have several picks. Should I prioritize wide receiver early on and take advantage of the depth later? My current wide receivers are Chase, Cup, Waddle, Hopkins, Mike Wilson. I would basically just draft. Is this in a rookie draft, Matt? Or is this a startup? Should I prioritize wide receiver early on or take advantage of the depth later with the wide receivers that you have? I'm assuming this is in a rookie draft or redraft. Nah, probably rookie draft. I would just take best player available. That's the final answer really on this, is just to take the best player available. If you are looking at a tiebreaker and you're like, well, I have a pick here that could be Worthy or BTJ or Jonathan Brooks. But I also have this other pick that there's no real running backs in that pick, and I could get a Jalen Polk or a Xavier Legette. Then I could use that as a tiebreaker to then take Jonathan Brooks, because then you're going to get a wide receiver a little bit later. But like if you're basically debating between Odunze and Brooks or anybody else like that, then I would, in a rookie draft. Yeah. So I would just take best player available. Early on, that's probably going to end up being wide receivers. And then later in your rookie draft, you could probably take some handcuff running backs. That's how I would approach it. But if you're using it as type, it's mainly just Jonathan Brooks. If you are looking at taking Jonathan Brooks, as long as you're not thinking about taking him over Odunze or Bowers or Neighbors for sure, then I think that it's fine to take Jonathan Brooks then at that point. But other than that, it's just BPA for me. And then BPA ends up later on in like the 3rd and 4th rounds of your rookie drafts, even late 2nd, ends up being like handcuff running backs or guys like that, like Wright and Corum and Ray Davis. And then you get Braylon Allen and Tyrone Tracy and all those guys. Those guys end up being BPA for me more than the wide receivers at that point. So that's how you could take advantage of still getting some running backs. Dan, 10-team superflex, what would you add to Jared Goff to obtain Purdy? A second or 2? I would not. I would not pay a second with Jared Goff to go get Brock Purdy. I feel like they're pretty similar. I mean, they're both pocket passing quarterbacks boosted by their offense, right? So there's not really much of a difference, and I don't think I would pay a second-round pick to move up from one to the other. It just doesn't really make sense. Like if you threw in both of them into a larger trade to where maybe you're upgrading somewhere else, if they view Brock Purdy above Jared Goff that much, then you should be able to upgrade at a different position. And I think that would, if that trade makes sense, then I think it makes sense to go from Goff to Purdy. But just as like one singular trade where it's Goff in a second for Purdy, I would take Goff in a second. I would take Goff in a third. It just doesn't make sense to me to do that little move between two quarterbacks that I don't view much of a difference between. Thinking about countering with A-Rich and a second for DJ Moore, a 25 and a 27 first, and add up to another second on the A-Rich side if needed. That's still not enough. You shouldn't have to add the 25 second, let alone up to another second. That's not enough for Anthony Richardson. DJ Moore and 2 firsts, I think it's fine. But the fact that it's a 2027 first is so devalued, in my opinion, that it really is just DJ Moore and a first. And I don't think that's enough still for Anthony Richardson. So that's where I stand. Maybe I'm too high on Anthony Richardson on this, or maybe, but that's just how I feel like you should be treating Anthony Richardson in your league. Logan, 12-team superflex, 1 PPR, got offered Gibbs for the 109, 209, 409, smash Jahmyr Gibbs. Yep, this is so easily Jahmyr Gibbs. Love it. Quick answer. Aaron, I've totally skipped over this didn't even pop up on my screen. I'm so sorry. I just kept going. Aaron with the $2 super chat. Thank you so much, man. 10 team start, 9 super flex, half PPR, half tight end premium. Dobbs and Leggett for David Montgomery. Ooh. So I'm assuming you're competing and probably need the running back depth. Am I right? I'm not really. This is basically Leggett for David Montgomery. I would probably take David Montgomery. And I'm assuming just from how this trade is constructed that you are a contender. You're looking for an extra RB2. That's the case. I'm still going for David Montgomery. Yeah. All right. We got. Hold on 1 second before I pronounce this name. Alexon. Nice. So it's like Xavier. I learned that Xavier Leggett, he pronounces it Leggett. But I mean, he says it in such a countrified accent that he's just like Xavier Leggett. That was terrible. But okay, so Alexon. That's how not Alex on, right? It's Alexon. Cool. Awesome. All right. Only because you butchered it a few times. I'm very sorry about that. 12 by 10 Superflex, no tight end premium, stuck in the middle with no 25 fix. Do you trade Dell for Kittle, Wandale, and Mike Williams? Ooh. No, I would keep Tank Dell. I don't think that this is enough. I get wanting to make a move because you're stuck in the middle, but I feel like the best way to do that is probably by diversifying and breaking up some of your assets into other assets that have the potential to either produce for you in your starting lineup or gain value for you to where you could lean more towards 2025 and start rebuilding. This, I don't think, satisfies either one of those. George Kittle, again, I believe that Brandon Ayuk is going to re-sign in San Francisco, and that's going to just make George Kittle continue to be what he has been, which is just like a very boom bust tight end. I would take Tank Dell over George Kittle. Wandale and Mike Williams does not move the needle for me. I don't think either one of them are interesting enough from a production standpoint that you're going to throw them in your starting lineup. And I don't think either one of them are interesting from a value standpoint to where something is going to happen and they're going to gain a bunch of value, especially Mike Williams. So this deal just doesn't really make sense to me. So I would take Tank Dell in this. Again, I like the process. I understand where your head's at. I just don't think that this is the right 2 or 3 players to make this deal for with Tank Dell. But I would continue on this path, see what else you could possibly be doing this for. But I just think that this specific trade just doesn't fit for me in either direction of pushing to compete or pushing to rebuild. So appreciate the $10 super chat, man. And Alexon, because I definitely have not pronounced it like that for probably a few weeks. So I appreciate you correcting me on that one. Thank you. How do you feel about Kyle Pitts this year? I have a lot of him this season. I think that he's going to have the breakout year that we've all been waiting for. I had a video. He's in a video on both DLF and the 4for4 YouTube channels. Basically, I say the same thing. But I think that this is finally the year for the Kyle Pitts breakout. I think everything's just kind of come together for him. He's year 2 removed after the knee injury, so he's fully healthy. He finally has a competent quarterback. There's no Jonnu Smith is gone, no competition. Much better offensive system with Arthur Smith out. We're getting a McVay Shanahan-y style offense. with Zach Robinson, who was the OC for the Rams last year. So I think that it's all coming together for Kyle Pitts to finally have his breakout year and get back to where he was as a rookie, as a 1,000-yard player with more than one touchdown. In a vacuum, Bijan in Rome or Breece in London? Breece in London. I don't see much of a difference between Breece and Bijan, but I would take London over Rome Odunze. For very similar reasons as to how I feel about Kyle Pitts. Like, I think that a lot of things are coming together for Drake London this year, and that he should have maybe not like a massive Uber level breakout year, but I think that he'll have a breakout third season. So I would take him over Odunze is the main differentiator here. Should we pick up any of these players? No, I wouldn't worry about it. Unless you are in like a 35-man roster or something like that. I'm not really all that worried. Like Vaki or I'm terrible at pronouncing names. But I don't think that he has a path to play. And then Holker is kind of in the same situation as well, too. To where, like, of the two, I'm more interested in Holker just because he could possibly maybe do something. But again, I just don't really know. Like, I don't know what he offers that Juwan Johnson doesn't offer, or just giving the ball to Taysom Hill instead. I'm not really worried about adding any one of these guys unless it is like a start or not start, but like roster 35 plus. I'm not throwing these guys on taxi squads. I'm not looking to pick them up. Not worth it to me. 12 team start 9 roster. Blah blah blah. What moves to make to boost championship odds this year? All right, so in a super flex, you need a better quarterback too. I think Geno, I think, is okay, but I would be looking to have a better QB2. Breece and Saquon are great. Warren is good RB3. Jefferson, Waddle, Diggs, Godwin, Hollywood. The only thing that I think I'd be looking to do is trade off of Stephon Diggs. That would maybe sound counterintuitive, but I don't think Stephon Diggs is going to be all that fantastic this year, to where maybe another contender sees them as gold, but actually they're fool's gold, and then you can get a little bit more from them, or maybe use Diggs as a way to upgrade and get a better QB2. That QB2, I think, is the way that I would look and go about it. Like, if you can get a Stafford or a Goff or a Cousins or an Aaron Rodgers, I'd feel more comfortable. That was a mix of confident and comfortable with one of those quarterbacks instead of Geno Smith in there. Breece and Saquon are good. Honestly, Saquon you could probably use to dangle. You could dangle him out there, see if you get a better QB2 that could extend for the long run as well. You could maybe toss out Addison or toss out Hollywood. Like, all of those guys, I think, are up for grabs to bolster your QB2 spot. That could help you, again, like I said, this year and in the long run for 2025 and beyond. Aaron, I don't know if there's a question attached to this. Roster looks very good, though. I like it a lot. Dale, 12 by 10, a couple decent handcuffs and McMillan type, traded Judy and Shaheed for 2 extra second, and in any instant moves to make or see how it shakes out. Great question. All right, so Levis Jones, Knicks. Is this a super flex league? That's the first question. If this is super flex, then I already know where you're going. Andrews and Hawk have locked down your tight ends. Love that. Love CeeDee Lamb. Flowers and Pickens and Reed just all feel very similar. I like. Oh, Aaron, roster was context for the super chat. I got you, my man. Yes. Trade for David Montgomery. Yes. Love it. Thank you. Sorry, Aaron. Been going too long. All right, Dale. I'm assuming that this is one quarterback. I really hope it's not super flex, because then you need to address the quarterback position. But if this is one quarterback, you're looking pretty solid. Achane I like. Swift is good. Spears is good. I think you need to address the the wide receiver position if this is one quarterback league. Because I don't think Flowers, Pickens, and Reed, they all just feel so similar that I would be trying to upgrade. Maybe use TJ Hawkinson to do that. Maybe use DeAndre Swift to do that, or Spears or somebody, or even Achane, and just blow up the running back position, move that over to the wide receiver position, and then use some of your excess wide receivers then to move back to the running back position. I think that would improve your longevity, your safety, your insulated value, and then also maybe just possibly make you more productive this year, depending on the trades and moves that you make, or how you maneuver your lineup. I like the trade to get the 2 extra seconds, though. Judy and Shaheed for 2 extra seconds is fantastic. You can use them then to upgrade somewhere else and see how it goes. Oh, Superflex. All right. So I would, in this context, then your running backs need to go. They need to be blown up and either traded over for wide receivers or quarterbacks. It might be easier to move them over for wide receivers and then trade the wide receivers, springboard them over to quarterbacks. But all three running backs are gone. And I would use Flowers, Reed, and Pickens as options to upgrade your quarterback position. You can hold on to CeeDee Lamb. You don't need to trade him yet, maybe possibly. But I would fill out that quarterback room first. I would blow up the running backs and see what you can do. Go for the cheap guys like Dak and Lawrence, and maybe you can get Kyler for cheap or Jayden Daniels for cheap. That's how I would be going about it. Kevin, Addison, 12-team superflex looking to contend. My wide receiver core is JJ, Marvin Harrison, London, Kirk. I need running back and I'm thinking of trading Deshaun Watson straight up for Kenneth Walker. Is it value suicide moving quarterback for running back? It's an interesting. I love that phrase, value suicide. No, I don't think so. I think Kenneth Walker is probably more valuable than Deshaun Watson. Watson has the potential to gain value just because he's a quarterback. And if he does, if he gets back to not even Texans form, but just gets back to like being a good quarterback that's not reliant on volume. I think most people would take Kenneth Walker over Deshaun Watson. If you can afford the loss of Deshaun Watson at the quarterback position, then I think it makes sense. And just go get Kenneth Walker. So yeah, I would take Walker. I'm comfortable doing that. I'm fine with that. Josh, what's up, man? Think Addison in a first is enough to get Achane. It'll probably be 112 or 111 in Superflex. I think on paper, just saying Addison in a first for Achane is enough to get it done, or at least gets you in the ballpark for like to have a good conversation to where maybe you need to add another second, then he adds a third, or you maneuver around in there to just adding smaller pieces to make it work. But the crux of the trade is Addison and first for Achane. I think saying that should get you into the conversation. If he's worried about it being a late first, like the 112 or 111, then you probably do need to add more. It probably would need to be at least a second to add more to that. But I think that's a good starting point and just kind of see where that gets you. But I would take Achane. Are you nervous with Jahan Dotson losing the wide receiver 2 spot on the Commanders with the latest report that came out? Now I'm looking. Jahan Dotson is learning no job is safe under a new Commander's staff. No, I'm not worried about it. I mean, like, I get it that there is a competition, and they didn't draft Jahan Dotson. They're not tied to him by any means, but I really just don't think that there's a better wide receiver on that team right now. Like, they drafted Luke McCaffrey. I don't think McCaffrey's better than Dotson. I don't think, like, they're in this thing, they're talking up Olamide Zaccheaus. Like, I don't think I don't think that Dotson is worse than Zacchaeus. I don't think that. No, I'm not worried about it. I'm really not worried about Dotson losing the wide receiver 2 spot. I just think that he's better than everybody that they have. I didn't see that report though. Now I'm kind of wondering. I have a bunch of alerts on my phone. Maybe something came up. No, I don't see anything. That's funny though. No, I think Dotson's better. Hashtag Penn State wide receiver, as you can see back there. Mr. E, last Friday I asked one quarterback, 10 team, 110 draft. I was able to get Harrison and Brown at the turn. Nice. Then went Lamar, Collins, Flowers, Brooks, Benson, then traded AJ for Debo and Kyron. Oh. I don't know if I would have done the AJ Brown trade. I think it's fine. I think it works. I love what you did. Like Marvin Harrison Jr., Nico Collins, Debo Samuel, Zay Flowers. That's phenomenal. Then you got Kyron and Brooks and Benson and Lamar as your one quarterback. I think that's great. I mean, you basically the startup went perfectly, like perfectly according to plan. I'm not sure if I would have done the AJ Brown trade, but like I said, like it's totally fine. I think that it works as a nice tear down, gives you an extra startable player in Kyron and Debo. Not sure how many people you start. I don't remember if you said that last week or not. But just with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, there's 7 or 8 right there, plus a tight end. Overall, I like the roster a lot. I like it a lot. I think you executed that startup draft very, very well. Thanks, my dude. Have a good weekend. Absolutely. Have a good weekend, Kevin. There it is. Okay. Sometimes when you're typing on the keyboard, you accidentally hit enter and you send the comment before you're ready to be done. 12 team zero flex start 10. Herbert and Love are my only quarterbacks. James Cook, Warren, Jefferson, Tank, Pittman, Flowers, Ferguson, and Chase Brown are my starters. What moves should I make to contend? What draft picks do you have? Do you have all of your 2025? Do you not have 2025s to work with? All your 2026s? I feel like those are pieces and assets that I need to know to see what you can do with. Megan, 12 team Superflex start 8, Lamar Brees. Holy crap. Any moves that I would make? Win? Go win your league? Megan, this is just such a flex. The fact that you Superflex start 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, those are all of your starters. And then you still you have Achane and Nico and Ayuk and Neighbors on the bench. No, there are no moves to make other than to continue to do what you're doing and win your championship. This is phenomenal, dude. Well done, Megan. All right, BG Gaming, you have your first and your fourth. Okay, so and all your 2026s, so no seconds really to work with. I think what I would do, I don't know if you have enough to compete. That's kind of what I've been looking at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. I don't think that you have enough to compete here. You should probably be looking more towards 2025. In which case I'd probably sell James Cook. I'd probably look at moving Jaylen Warren, maybe Chase Brown too, or maybe you could take Chase Brown into the season, see if he actually is a starter, or if Zach Moss gets hurt and Chase Brown does well, then you could trade him. I like your wide receiver core. I don't really think you need to do anything with your wide receiver core, but I think that you should be looking at optimizing your roster a little bit more with either getting, and it's just, I'm not a huge fan of James Cook. I'm not a massive fan of Jaylen Warren either. I also just don't think that you have enough in a start 10. Maybe you could do some tear down options. Maybe you could just trade guys for more picks and then hope to hit on running backs in next year's class. Or maybe you trade down from James Cook and you get a David Montgomery in a second or something like that, or like I would probably try to do a trade down with James Cook. Maybe explore a trade down with one of your quarterbacks and like with Herbert, maybe you can go from Herbert to Goff plus or something like that. But I think you are looking at 2025. So Herbert and Love and your wide receivers are probably all fine on your team. It's just figuring out what to do with your running backs and your picks. I don't want to say that you're stuck because you're not stuck, but you just have to be very conscious about the moves that you're making. And I think your moves should be with the running back position and maybe explore what you can get for Justin Herbert and a trade down. I wouldn't pull the trigger on anything quickly, but I would explore it. Megan Stack picks last year, cashed them out rather than using them, sold high on Swift, Puka, and Sam Howell, and got early to mid first for them early last season. Sheesh. That would be your move to just continue to do all of that because obviously you've done a phenomenal job, Megan. That is fantastic. Alixon, Superflex 10 by 11 PPR. Pronounce it right, I think. Alixon. Strong contender with only Henry at running back. Would you trade JSN, Baker, and a second for Rachaad White? No. I like the idea of moving your wide receiver depth. Yeah, I agree that you have a lot of guys that all could be moved for running backs. I just don't think that Rachaad White is the play. I don't know if JSN is the best player to use to go to a running back either. I'm not a huge Rachaad White fan for this year. I'd be looking at Ramondre Stevenson or David Montgomery or Javonte Williams even, or maybe you could flip, I don't know, Curtis Samuel and something for James Conner or Franklin and something for James Conner. I'd rather do that and then have, even if you have extra depth at wide receiver, I think that's fine. But if you could hit on multiple running backs, if you get two of the guys that I just mentioned, I think that would set you up a lot better. Even if you got to use these wide receivers, if you got to use Godwin, even if you got to use JSN too, but I think just make sure that you get a good enough value back. I don't think this is good enough for Rachaad White. And in a 10 by 11, you kind of need depth at a certain point too. So, like the thought process, don't like the execution of it in theory for this trade. I'm just not a huge Rachaad White fan. I think JSN is worth more than Rachaad White, let alone add Baker and a second on top. Danaconda, keeper league, 10-person PPR scoring. Should I keep Breece using a 4th or Taylor using a 10th? Holy crap. Taylor using a 10th. Wow. I think I would. Oh, man. My Breece Hall love is coming in here. But I think the smart answer is Jonathan Taylor with a 10th. Just because you're still getting a top 5 potential running back, but you're doing it at 6 rounds cheaper. And I don't know what pick you have in the first round, but maybe you could get Breece Hall back. Maybe. I think I would keep Jonathan Taylor, though. Yep, Jonathan Taylor, final answer. Also have Bucky Irving. Does that make a difference? No. I just like rostering handcuffs, but I'm not really like just because I roster the handcuff, doesn't mean I want to go out and spend to get the starter. But also, again, I just don't really necessarily have much faith in Rachaad White, and I don't think that that's a good trade in general. Like, I just want to have JSN, Baker in the second instead of White. Maybe try to see if you can get running backs in a different way too. James, have you ever played in a contract league, like an auction league, except that you can sign guys to multi-year deals, etc.? I'd recommend to a friend. I have an RSO league. So I'm in an RSO Dynasty league, Reality Sports Online, for anybody that doesn't know. The salary cap matches what the NFL salary cap is. So every year it basically goes up. It like we have I don't even know what the salary cap is anymore, like 100 or 200 or I don't know, whatever. But it matches wherever the NFL salary cap is. And then every year we have an free agent auction for all of the free agents. We toss them in, then we have an auction draft for all of them. And then the rookie drafts, each slot has a contract and a contract value associated with it too in a number of years. So yeah, I would recommend it for sure. It definitely changes up values and it's weird to see certain trades get done, but then you're like, oh, that guy had a massive contract and this guy had a really cheap contract that makes him even more valuable. So it is definitely, I do agree that it is very, very fun. MV, what would you expect in return for Bijan in a 12-team dynasty PPR in general? All right. So ideally, I'd like to get a top 10 wide receiver. I feel like is where you could land. In ADP, he is right after Amon-Ra St. Brown and right before Marvin Harrison Jr. So you kind of have that in terms of value at the wide receiver position. And that's probably what I would expect is somewhere along those value lines. Quarterback range, you're probably in the, if this is a super flex league, you're probably in like the Trevor Lawrence, Jayden Daniels, Dak Prescott, maybe Kyler Murray range, Jordan Love range. That's kind of where you're at. This is a super flex league. And then I would need probably, if you're just talking about rookie picks, probably at least 3 firsts for Bijan, especially if you're talking about, somebody doesn't have 3 2025 firsts, but it's 2 25s and then 26 or a 25, 26, 27. Like that's what I'd be looking for Bijan Robinson. Glad I'm not the only one torn on it. I don't know what my first round position is, but was also thinking of trying to grab another stud running back. That would be so ideal. Like if you end up with like a top 3 pick and you could potentially get Breece Hall back, or if it ends up being HN or Gibbs or anybody like that, ETN, I think that would be fantastic. Yes, I would. I would do that for Kyron. I think that's the difference between Kyron and Rachaad White. So yeah, I would do that for Kyron if you can get that done. David, any tips on how/where to find reliable startup leagues? Been stuck in a couple that go dark or fold after a year. Good question. Safeleagues.com is the first place that I would throw people at. They have different dynasty leagues or different kind of like dynasty setting leagues that you could join. I'm not sure if they're running any right now, though. That's kind of the hard part. Safe Leagues. It's safeleaguesfantasy.com. Oh, there is one. Oh, it's a $500 league. Holy crap. Let's go to the new leagues page. Do they not have any? So apparently the only one that you can join on Safe Leagues right now is a $500 one. I would also look at my FFPC. So the FFPC leagues are really good too. I actually just joined a startup, or we just finished a startup. It was an FFPC league that I did with a bunch of DLF people. So I was in that, and I do like the platform, and the leagues are very easy to join too. They just have like normal standard ones. They have best ball, superflex best ball. They got like this RotoViz one, which I think is the one that we played, RotoViz Triflex. The only issue really with those is that those are also, I think, $100 fees. Yeah, so it's like $100 minimum for startups. I think BDGE has startups going on in their big truck just drove by. BDG, I think, has startups that in their Discord. We have startups probably, I think, in our Discord on DLF. You could also go into the DLF forum and try to see if there's any startups going on there. But I feel like that's when like the online stuff is where I think you start getting into less reliability from forums or Reddit or Discord or anything like that. To where if you could just find a platform that has dynasty leagues like FFPC, like safeleagues.com, I think that would be kind of the way to go. Safe Leagues is fun, as is FFPC is really fun too. I'd recommend both of those if it fits into your budget. Yeah. Jared, any glaring needs besides youth for the old roster? Youth. Yeah. Your wide receivers could maybe use a look. Just the fact that you have Waddle, Cup, and Flowers, and then just kind of like Judy, I think. I feel a sneeze coming on. Bless me. Waddle, Cup, Flowers as your main wide receiver, and then Sutton is just kind of whatever. Judy, I think Judy's bad. Purcell's interesting. Jones, B-Rob, yeah. Sold Swift for Pitts and B-Rob. That's phenomenal. That's a phenomenal trade. So continue to do that. But overall your roster is very balanced. I think you can definitely cross off tight ends off the list. Quarterbacks look pretty solid with Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. Maybe they're just not as optimal to me. Like maybe you want a different quarterback than Herbert or something like that for competing this year. Still fantastic for Dynasty. Running backs, Breece Hall, perfect. Aaron Jones, Brian Robinson, love that. It really just would be like, from my standpoint, like I'd be trying to see what I could do with this wide receiver position. Maybe that is trading away Breece Hall. Maybe that's tearing down from one of your quarterbacks. Maybe that's trading up using future picks to move Sutton in a first round pick for, I don't know, Nico Collins or Brandon Ayuk or something like that. Like that would be what I'd be looking at if you can do that. Just wide receivers. Who are you taking at the 401 and a one quarterback? It's pretty similar to the list that I had earlier in the late third. But if you could get any of Ray Davis, Javon Baker, Jatavion Sanders, or handcuffs like Braylon Allen, Tyron Tracy, Bucky Irving, Will Shipley, any of those guys I think would be phenomenal. It's more than likely going to end up being a handcuff running back, just because I like the handcuff running backs in that range more so than the wide receivers. Like I don't really want Tez Walker or Jalen McMillan or anything like that, you know? So I would rather just have a handcuff running back or Jatavion Sanders. Alrighty. The Bengals have agreed to terms with Evan McPherson. Wow. Very cool. All right. Seems like we've gotten to the end of the questions now. We've been going now for like an hour and 45 minutes. So holy crap. Lots of questions today. Absolutely love it. Love all the activity. Football season is back. People are figuring out what the heck they're doing for 2024. I love it. But all right, unless we got a buzzer beater of a question, this is where we can end things. And go until next week. No news is happening other than Evan McPherson. None that I see. All right. Well, there we go. Another Friday in the books. Appreciate all of you guys for hanging out for the past hour, 45 minutes. Again, if you had any other additional questions or if there's anything that we talked about, then you want to kind of return to, or another trade that you want to just kind of check on, you can drop that in the comments of this video and the replay, or the another video as well. And I'm the one who answers the comments, questions in the comments and stuff. So yeah, I would do Kyron for this one. I'd take Kyron there. I'm fine with that one. Better than Rachaad White. But yeah, so like I said, drop a comment if you have any more questions. Other than that, thank you guys so much for hanging out, and we will be back again next Friday. So have a great rest of your Friday today. Have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy some more preseason football. Hopefully some more starters play for longer now because it's week 2. So, but yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next Friday. Later.